Thanks everyone for joining us at this. I think it's the last parallel session of the conference, right? So thank you for giving us your time. Welcome to our panel, Liberating Cinema, Developing Capabilities of Youth in South Africa Through Community Film Experiences. My name is Ashley Ellis. I'm a writer, filmmaker, and social impact designer by profession. I'm originally from the US, but I live in Cape Town, South Africa, where I'm currently a doctoral candidate at the University of Cape Town's Center for Film and Media Studies and co-supervised by the School of Education. And I want to thank both schools for supporting my attendance here today. So, Liberating Cinema is a new organization concerned with decolonization and decoloniality, critical consciousness, and social-emotional learning for human development and capabilities building towards a freer, more equitable, and peaceful society. We bring theory and practice together to produce content, research, and experiences using film and visual media as a vehicle and a language through which to engage in building capabilities. We've launched in South Africa, but aim to bring our work to more global communities in the future, physically, but also through publication and information sharing. This is our first opportunity to create a dialogue amongst other like-minded thought leaders with mutual interests, and we're thrilled to connect with you here, and we hope that you will continue to engage and communicate with us after the conference is over. One of our goals is to make research more accessible and digestible to audiences outside of academia, and to publish these sort of summaries through our website, which will launch in the coming weeks. So we would love to highlight your work if you feel that it's of interest, and you can feel free to get in touch with me about that. We originally also planned on a third presentation on the role of film spectatorship and exhibition as a form of play and community building, but unfortunately our other colleague was unable to attend the conference for personal reasons. So hopefully this will give us a little bit more time to share some media and also for dialogue after. So without further delay, let me begin. Liberating Cinema, the platform, was born from my PhD research project, which shares the same name. The research project is co-created with adolescent youth using participatory practices and invites them to a workshop where they learn filmmaking tools and techniques from creative professionals and filmmakers with whom they share identities and lived experiences, and watch both locally made and global cinema before embarking on their own collaborative process to write and produce a short film. The project has two central research questions. One, how does a critical consciousness and filmmaking educational experience with Black South African adolescents in resource-poor urban communities affect participants' agency and perception of self and others? And two, how does the resulting film compare to dominant representations of Blackness in their media cultures? The first question is an investigation of process, examining pedagogy and practice. My use of critical consciousness refers to Freire's concept, a process of learning to recognize political, economic, and social contradictions so as to act against oppression. And critical consciousness is developed through purposeful dialogue and participatory action. To understand agency, I use Sen's definition, and this is where my interest in engaging with you here aligns. So looking at what a person is free to do and achieve in pursuit of whatever goals or values he or she regards important. Today I'm going to focus on the first research question because I feel like it's the most relevant to our collective interest. So this week we've been exchanging ideas around vulnerability in turbulent times and the ways in which development solutions forged through a capabilities approach can help us to sustain through such times. In developing and supporting capabilities, education has the monumental task of preparing young people to face the global challenges of our time. Extreme inequality, migration, the discrimination of historical others, climate change, and the sixth mass extinction are creating more turbulence the world over. Studies show that these issues negatively impact mental health, yet emotional well-being is key to our collective ability to put solutions into action. The next generations will be unequipped to solve these problems unless education prepares learners to value humanity, to manage their social and emotional being, to embrace difference with empathy and inclusion, and to solve problems with critical thinking and creativity. In a UNDP report on youth vulnerabilities, 3 of the reasons given for the rise in international political interest in addressing this issue resonate. Adolescence and youth are periods in the human life cycle when people are particularly susceptible to adversity due to the physical and cognitive changes experienced and the transition between powerlessness and autonomy. Yet when young people do not realize their potential, it impacts their capability throughout their adulthood and negatively impacts whole communities and economies. And the world has changed significantly in the life course of our current generation of youth. Young people the world over are experiencing a particular kind of vulnerability as they reach a stage in their lives and development that Mozambican anthropologist Alcinda Hanwana calls waithood, defined as a prolonged period of suspension in which young people's access to social adulthood is delayed or denied, a period when young people cannot fully exercise their agency. The continuation and pervasiveness of waithood is shaped by ongoing economic crises and political marginalization. Yet the UN has highlighted the important role of young people's voices in ensuring the health, economic growth, peace and security of their societies. It is called young people's potential the key to sustainable development in sub-Saharan Africa, the youngest region in the world with over 70% of its population under the age of 30. In the context of South Africa, where half of the population is between 15 and 34, the high school dropout and youth unemployment rates have increased since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. The youth unemployment rate is estimated at around 67%, although I found various statistics, and as of last year, is the second highest in the world, following Djibouti. Young people in South Africa are particularly vulnerable and in need of support, both inside and outside of traditional education institutions and workplaces, in order to create strategies of resistance, repair from consistent exposure to hazards and trauma, and ultimately to realize their full potential. Vulnerability may be most visible during times of war and conflict, or disaster, and in the immediate aftermath of such events. But historical oppression and long-term inequities are also root causes of vulnerability. In particular, Black youth in global urban communities face multiple forms of oppression in rapidly changing environments. They need, but often lack due to oppressed circumstances, vehicles for holistic capabilities development, through which to develop identity and consciousness and counteract this oppression. Blackness is a construct, and it's only one part of my research participants' identities, whether by self-identification or social prescription. Yet the issue of color is central to the global effort towards decolonization, decoloniality, and anti-racism. Because of this, the racial element to my research question is meaningful in the process of designing an experience of value for all youth, and I integrate ideas from Black consciousness and critical race theory into my writing for this reason. The gross inequality of our global economy is a colonial legacy, yet inequality is more than quantitative values. Inequality is also constructed by our understanding of ourselves and the world, and by our acceptance of cultural hegemony. Cultural hegemony must be deconstructed to unlock more human potential and to create an equitable global society. But meanwhile, as a result of our current socio-technical landscape, humans have become inundated with visual media and moving images. A quote from the journalist Mitchell Stevens beautifully states the power of film. We misunderstand moving images when we think of them as merely a form of communication, a type of entertainment, a means of informing, or an art form. Perhaps books, newspapers, or radio can squeeze under such headings. Moving images with sound, because they occupy both of our major senses, cannot. They are more than that. They are a place we go. Film and media contribute to cultural hegemony. If moving images are a place we go, then we must ask where audiences are being taken, by whom, and why. However, much of our thinking about human development and education as a result is still dominated by a focus on the economic growth of nations. In response to this, the capabilities approach may allow us to better locate the roots of inequalities. As it pertains to education, I feel like there are some of the central capabilities that deserve more attention in classrooms, such as imagination, and it's described as the ability to use imagination and thought in connection with experiencing and producing works and events of one's own choice, whether religious, literary, musical, or so on. Additionally, emotions, practical reason, and affiliation involve the development of healthy emotional attachments, empathy, critical thinking, and self-determination. Education designed just to prepare young people for employment is inadequate. Education that includes the aforementioned capabilities in its mandate has the potential to break down cultural hegemony and foster social emotional intelligence. This will not just expand capabilities for the most oppressed people, but transform development for us all. Youth filmmaking is an incredible potential tool for education to help in this process of unlearning. It's noteworthy that Black diaspora film and third cinema traditions, which emerged at the same time as global anti-colonial independence movements in the last century, have always existed as political orientations and oppositional cultural practices beyond mere artistic expression. This research project also draws on a legacy of filmmakers in these canons who understand the relationship between cinema and capabilities development. The filmmakers who participated in the first Third World Filmmakers meeting held in Algiers in 1973 resolved that the cinema could influence the masses because of its essential importance that is at the same time artistic, aesthetic, economic, and sociological, affecting to a major degree the training of the mind. Yet in critical pedagogy, Freire argues that liberation is only attained through cultural synthesis, during which the masses are not merely spectators, but also participants in the action and therefore able to become critically conscious. So what does this mean for Black South African adolescents and their learning? And what are the implications for transforming education more broadly? Approximately 15 kilometers outside of the city center of Cape Town, South Africa, in a township called Gugulethu, the workshop launched in January 2023. A construct of the apartheid era, Gugulethu, which translates to our pride in English, was created in the 1960s as a Black-only neighborhood to house Black Cape Townians who were forced to migrate after their own communities had been designated for other racial groups. Today, the dominant narrative of Gugulethu and Cape Town's other townships focuses on the lack of shelter, sanitation, clean water and electricity, as well as the high levels of unemployment and poverty and the violence, crime, gangsterism, and health disparities that occur as a result. All of these issues impact the vulnerability and capabilities of the young people who live in townships. Yet these communities are increasingly being seen as sites with great potential for transformative practice, spaces where a complete reimagining of the urban space and the ideation of solutions to major problems is possible. So I formed a partnership with one such site called Lumkile's Book Joint, part of a residential home converted into a community library and internet lounge, in order for participant recruitment to channel through a trusted local source and to have a safe location for meeting the youth that was physically accessible to them. Through social media and word of mouth, we recruited 12 Black youth between the ages of 13 and 18 with parity between girls and boys. And all of the participants were either from Gugulethu or a neighboring township called Khayelitsha. Then over the course of 3 months, the workshop took place, mostly at University of Cape Town's UCT TV studios, a film and television production studio utilized by the Center for Film and Media Studies and available for hire in the broader industry. UCT TV provided access to their soundstage, editing suite, and some film equipment. And the cameras and tripods were provided by Visual Impact, a local film equipment service provider. The workshop was an all-day intensive schedule during the winter break from school and on weekends thereafter, and was designed around 3 distinct phases that each informed the next. The first phase focused on interpersonal skills development, team building, and self-reflection through whole group, small group, and at-home activities. These activities included icebreakers, writing and retelling lived experience, community mapping, and more. And they transpired mostly over the first few days. Concurrently, the second phase focused on story development and practical filmmaking skills development. Participants were asked to envision a single story that they would produce together and were told it should be a short film concept. But beyond that, there were no other limitations placed on them at all. The group organized and led their own brainstorming sessions in which they chose to make creative decisions by consensus. The team was only able to advance once those who were of a minority opinion were satisfied enough with the direction to continue. They chose to write a fictional script over a documentary and imagined a story called The Unexpected about 2 teenage girls whose lives are forever changed when they decide to sneak out to attend a social media influencer's party. The film comments on issues of poverty, teen pregnancy, substance abuse, sexuality, and the generational divide. These are issues that the youth feel are in some ways relevant to their own experiences, but in general are considered what they consider negative attributes of their communities. Once they went through a process of developing the plot and major characters together, they nominated 4 participants to write the script. At the same time, early and mid-career Black creatives joined me on different days in order to present concepts, share their experiences, and teach practical skills on topics that covered story elements, script writing, camera operating, lighting, image construction, sound design and recording, interviewing, directing, acting, production design, producing, and editing. We used locally made films, Black diaspora film, Third Cinema, and World Cinema as the majority of the sample content screened, but we also utilized the wealth of film education videos available online. By design, the teaching films and materials provided diverse visual storytelling languages. Our approach to exploring theory and concepts with them was an inquisitive process meant to draw out their original point of view rather than prescribing industry standards based on American or Eurocentric methods. Some of the facilitators used local language and vernacular in their teaching, and I encouraged the youth to use their own original terminology to understand and reinforce key concepts. The final phase of the workshop was the production of the short film. The youth started with a guided pre-production process that asked them to consider all of the material resources that would be necessary to execute their idea, and then to identify those resources within their networks, which at this point included all of the people who were involved in facilitating the Liberating Cinema project itself. They engaged family, friends, and community members in order to secure filming locations, cast principal roles and extras, gathered key props, costumes, and set decoration. Then, over the course of 5 full days of production, the participants organized themselves as a crew and embarked on shooting the film. They assigned their own performance and production roles and decided that at least 2 people would share each production role in order to minimize mistakes and any feelings of undue pressure. Filming took place in Guguletu and Lenga townships, in Bokop, a heritage neighborhood of Cape Town's city center, and at Llandudno Beach, a pristine coastal town on the outskirts of the city. Due to the spatial segregation in Cape Town and its surrounding areas, there were security concerns regarding each location. When filming in the townships, a private security company was hired to minimize the threat of robbery. And when filming in town and at the beach, the participants had to leave before sunset, when it would be considered otherwise unsafe for transportation to drive them home. Despite these challenges, the team managed to shoot the entirety of their script. Afterwards, the participants worked in two-person teams to edit their film. The Unexpected had its only public screening to date during a wrap party that Liberating Cinema hosted for the participants, and attended mostly by parents and families of the participants. The wrap party was not only an important moment of recognition for them, but also opened up an intergenerational dialogue around the main themes of their story. Throughout the workshop, we formed small group cogents, which operated as spaces in which the participants could give me critical feedback at the end of each day and offer new ideas for the workshop's design that I did my best to implement in the days that followed. I nominated the first cogent of 3 youth, which included the most outgoing and the most shy participant, in my opinion. And they were also assigned specific roles or tasks to take on in organizing the workshop, such as setting up the space, introducing guest facilitators, even DJing during the breaks. After participating in a few feedback sessions, one cogent group member would exit the group and nominate their own replacement. The cogents not only allowed their design ideas to come forward, but also gave them ownership and self-management of their own creative space. So now I want to play with you, for you, just a couple minutes of their film.
Sisi awufa na base kantoni ngawo kajike undijonge wethu jonga uchitha namanzi ngoku kajike undijonge base kantoni ku.
There's nothing wrong, Mama.
Ndithe kwenzela ujike undijonge kufuna ndiphakame apha ndizokufaka inkunzi yempama. Khawunyuse nthulo lwaqa wale jezi umnxibileyo because ndiyarhoka umithi wena. Simkhitha ndikusa esikolweni for uba mawufunde. Ungafani nam kodwa wena ukhethe yolala namakhwenkwe. Kubani utata lo mntana ummithile? Phendula ntombazana ungandilibazisi.
Oh no, Mama.
Uxolo ntoni? Kubani utata lo mntana ummithile? Ungixelele khona.
Steve, Mama. Uthi akafuni into endidibanisa nam.
Ngoku wena ucumuza mondla ntoni umntana? Ufunda. Ngomso at 7 first thing in the morning sihamba seklinikhi sokhupha lo mntana lowo.
Ndizoyike isikolo, Mama. Ndifune umsebenzi. Into endingakwazi uyenza kukhupha umntana, Mama.
Yewethu, hebethuna. Simkhitha. Yazi simkhitha. Ndicela usuke phambi kwamehlo am. Ndicela usuke phambi kwamehlo am. Hamba.
Tommy, Mama knows everything.
Yo, hayi wishy mntase. No wonder ndimxele ngozinathi. Although she wasn't shocked, she said she understands. But ingxaki ngutata. He's going on about his expectations, like the whole traditional thing of meeting a man, having kids and getting married. And Kesana, he said very hurtful words to me.
What did he say?
Uthe bana ebengayazi uba uyozazala isitabane ndiyamonyanyisa.
We're both basically going through hell. No one Mama is telling me how much of a laughing stock I've made her to be. It's true, you've got your mom on your side. Maybe your dad will come through eventually.
No, Chomi, I don't want to talk to him. Not now. But like, your parents would never stay mad at you forever.
Yeah, maybe.
Yes, Chomi. It's crazy how our parents want us to do things the way they want us to. And they say the most hurtful things that will break us. And they don't even realize it sometimes. Okay? I guess, anyway, we gotta keep it gangster. Shomsana will talk later. I'm meeting up with Uzinati.
Bye, later.
I'm currently in the early stages of data analysis, but I'll share a little bit about my process and a few emergent thoughts that have come through so far. On the first day the participants gathered, I asked them to complete a survey in order to gain an understanding of the visual media content that they consume and to define their respective media cultures. In other words, they are part of the media cultures based on their consumption. I also conducted one-on-one interviews during which we discussed their self-perception, school and family life, experiences of and in their communities, media consumption, dreams and goals, and expectations of the research project. These interviews were followed by a similar post-workshop interview, which included their reflections on the project and their film. My data set includes these surveys and interviews, as well as photography and video recordings of the workshop, my own narrative analysis, and the completed film itself. So I'll be doing some content analysis of the film, more related to my second research question on how they represent Blackness in the film. To make sense of it all, I'm using cultural historical activity theory, a theory and a framework for analysis which accounts for the dynamic influences of self, society, culture, environment, and experience on human development. Chat originated with the work of Russian psychology scholar Lev Vygotsky and is built upon his theory of mediated action, that human consciousness develops from our interactions with mediating artifacts, tools, and social others, in other words, referred to as activity. 3 generations of chat scholarship bring us to the current generation of the theory, which continues to gain interest. The first generation was introduced in Moscow in the mid-1920s as a result of Vygotsky's research with his contemporaries Alexander Luria and Alexei Leontiev, and centered on Vygotsky's theory of mediated action. The idea of semiotic mediation is demonstrated in this Vygotskyan triangular model, which includes subject, object, and mediating artifact, culminating in a complete activity. The second generation developed through the continued work of Leontiev after Vygotsky's untimely death in 1934. It builds upon Vygotsky's ideas about individual psychological processes towards the collective activity, towards an object, adding the elements of community rules and division of labor to the model to form what we call the activity system. And the third generation, which came about as chat scholarship spread throughout the world in the 70s and 80s, recognizes the collective activity systems are made up of groups of individual agents with differing worldviews, that they evolve over time, and that they interact with other collective activity systems. Third generation scholars are increasingly applying the framework to better understand the complex nature of identity development and the expression of agency through the interactions within and between activity systems. The fundamental concept in chat's relationship to pedagogy is that it is as a result of this complex activity and the natural tensions that arise in the process that development and learning occurs. Chat has influenced 2 pedagogical frameworks that I also draw inspiration from. And there's a close relationship between the Vygotskyan perspective and Paulo Freire's critical pedagogy that emerged in 1970. Both perspectives revolve around the idea that people produce history and culture while they are reciprocally produced by them. Both perspectives ground development and learning in collaborative praxis and focus on theorizing consciousness that affords self-regulation and capacity for agentive action. Moreover, both place teaching learning at the center of human development, which crucially depends on a more knowledgeable other. Social emotional learning is the process through which people enhance their ability to integrate thinking, feeling, and behaving to achieve important life tasks. Freire argues that for an individual to be engaged in critical thinking and motivated to take the necessary actions that will change her circumstance, the hierarchical relationship between teacher and student must be transformed into a relationship between teacher-students and student-teachers, in which both are involved in gaining new knowledge and ways of understanding. Involving the participants means first understanding who they are, what they think and feel, and the circumstances of the environment and community in which they live. Freire presents this concept as thematic investigation, which consists of open discussions as well as a physical exploration of the environment, with the subjects of the investigation creating a space for creativity. And the second chat-influenced concept that informs the project is called radical local teaching and learning, which is concerned with how to relate educational practices to children's specific historical and cultural conditions, both the objective conditions in which the children live and their comprehension and relationship to those conditions. The elements of the activity system provide an organizing structure for a first step, my first step, of creating coding classifications And within each of these categories, I've created subsequent codes representing the various elements of the workshop process and the aspects of the participants' internal and external lives, selves, and experiences under investigation. One immediately striking observation is that while Liberating Cinema, the workshop, is the entire activity system in this case, Liberating Cinema as a community lands itself on the list of communities that the youth participants now belong to. This indicates both a teaching, learning, and radical local approach at work, as the system functions by the meeting and merging of the youth's existing or local communities with a new community of peers and adults who bring new sets of knowledge and resources into their sphere. The existing communities and the new one are integral to achieving the object, as represented by the necessary tools which were made available to the different communities in the system. So here in blue, I've highlighted these are the tools that Liberating Cinema provided. In yellow, those were tools that we sometimes provided, but other times their local communities did. And then in the teal color, those were provided by their local or existing communities. And it's still up for debate because my supervisor and I are having a bit of a back and forth about whether the object is telling the story and making the film, or if the object is actually the development that I was hoping would occur. So that's a debate for another day. With hundreds of gigabytes of data to analyze, the sharing of my findings could take another presentation altogether, and I've already been talking for a long time. But in conclusion, I just want to share a few anecdotal statements from the interviews I conducted, which will hopefully give you a slightly better understanding of what the data has elicited. So on the question of how would you describe yourself, in the beginning, this participant said, I would describe myself as a quiet and funny person sometimes, and weird sometimes. Yeah, that's it. But after, they said, I would describe myself as a funny person. I'm goofy at times, and what else can I say about myself? I get moody at times, but those moments come and go. But overall, I'm just a great person. I see myself differently, very much so, Ash, because every time when I watch a movie, I see the movie in a different perspective. I think about the sound, I think about what's going on behind the set and how they created everything. You could kind of see that this participant directly related their increase in knowledge of filmmaking to their current self-perception. On the question of what is your biggest goal or dream, one participant in the beginning said, I really, really want my life to end up in that place where I'm like a big star, mostly a director, I would say, or an actor. Yes, I want my life to lead me there. But then after, they said, my long-term goal is actually to continue with this career path, and I'm doing this. I'm going down this career path, and I'm sticking to it. Nothing is changing. Liberating Cinema was beyond what I expected. I didn't know that this was going to be this big, and it was somewhat life-changing because I've seen and experienced what I'm actually going into, since I'm choosing this career path. It was mind-opening and thought-provoking. So in this case, the participant went from describing a lofty, somewhat passive hope that life would lead to a certain destination to understanding that they are the catalyst toward the career of their dreams. And they also elected to enroll in a theater course upon entering high school after starting our project. On the question of what did you learn from the most difficult moments on set, one person said there are always going to be creative differences, and not always are people going to go with your idea in certain cases. You must try to be at least open-minded and very considerate when it comes to other people's ideas. And there was a lot of feedback around how working together on a creative output forced them to develop their skills around relating to other people and communicating with others. Both around understanding the point of view of another, but also around being willing to speak up and voice one's own opinion. Has your point of view changed at all about your community and how you see it? This person said, I haven't seen any change whatsoever, but I have had a bit of a change in view of it, because I've been only looking at it from a view of I don't see the good in it. I really focused on the negative parts of the community, but now I've seen that there's more positive things that are happening in the community. To be honest, me focusing on the negatives was because I didn't even leave the house, so I never knew. I only knew what I heard from other people, so I never experienced the positive aspects of the community. So now that I know that we have libraries, swimming pools, we have tutors, we have everything. Not everything. Mostly what we might need is a support group. And lastly, do you see yourself differently after finishing the film? One participant said, before I came into this project, I was a different person, but now I've changed even the way I dress, how I speak, and how I let people know who I am. And another said, yeah, it made me see the world in a different way. Meeting with other people, I just felt like I learned that we all come from different situations. As we were watching the movies, and I remember when Ash told us to read our stories, then when I heard the stories, I could see that these things are issues that are happening in our communities and around the world. So obviously I chose to share with you some of the positive reflections, and there's a wealth of data there. The majority of the participants noted the importance of one particular exercise that was asked of them in the first week of the workshop. They were prompted to write a story about a particular challenge that they had faced in life, and they were then quite nervous to share their stories out loud in small group settings the following day. They cited that this activity demonstrated all of the ways in which their experiences were similar, and therefore that they are not alone in their struggles, but they are also unique, and therefore that it's important to empathize with others. The old adage rings true here, that you never know what someone else is going through, yet storytelling helps us to know one another a little bit better. Overall, though none of the participants reported having had any arts education experience prior to this workshop, all participants reported overwhelmingly positive thoughts and feelings towards their experience and their final film, and demonstrated signs of identity and agency development, as well as positive social emotional learning. In addition to the completion of my data analysis, important follow-up questions about the potential for broader implementation loom around how such an intervention can make room for the integration of complementary activities that draw from repair practices, such as healing justice practices or otherwise. How this intervention can be packaged into a shareable tool that could be replicated and implemented in different cultural contexts or in communities or school environments where there may be little to no access to the tools, equipment, and resources that I had access to. How barriers to participants' continued arts and filmmaking practice post-intervention could be removed or minimized. And finally, how this kind of teaching, learning, and learning teaching could foster a space for the films themselves to become peer-to-peer communication and teaching tools. My ultimate hope is that this research project will offer valuable ideas about the influence of narrative, imagination, creativity, and collaboration on adolescent capabilities development. It presents filmmaking as a participatory, collaborative effort and invites an expression of the filmmaker's agency. Co-creating this project with participants who were able to tell their own stories by learning new methods, but also by designing new methods, is a step toward decolonizing research and pedagogy and undoing cultural hegemony, which has limited our collective understanding of ourselves and our shared humanity, and has thwarted our ability for inclusion and repair for far too long.